When the Edward Snowden story about NSA spying first broke, Glenn Greenwald, who broke the story, went on Meet the Press, and he dealt with absurd questions from David Gregory, who, of course, was the host of Meet the Press. Now it's Chuck Todd, who in many ways is similar to David Gregory, but back then it was David Gregory. So for those of you who don't remember this exchange, let's take a look at this first.
You are a polemicist here. You have a point of view. You are a columnist. You're also a lawyer. You do not dispute that Edward Snowden has broken the law, do you?
No, I think he's very clear about the fact that he did it because his conscience compelled him to do so, just like Daniel Ellsberg did 50 years ago when he released the Pentagon Papers and also admits that he broke the law. I think the question, though, is how can he be charged with espionage? He didn't work for a foreign government. He could have sold this information for millions of dollars and enriched himself. He didn't do any of that either. He stepped forward and, as we want people to do in a democracy, as a government official, learned of wrongdoing and exposed it so we could have a democratic debate about the spying system. Do we really want to put people like that in prison for life when all they're doing is telling us as citizens what our political officials are doing in the dark?
Final question for you, but I'd like you to hang around. I just want to get Pete Williams in here as well. To the extent that you have aided and abetted Snowden, even in his current movements, why shouldn't you, Mr. Greenwald, be charged with a crime?
I think it's pretty extraordinary that anybody who would call themselves a journalist would publicly muse about whether or not other journalists should be charged with felonies. The assumption in your question, David, is completely without evidence, the idea that I've aided and abetted him in any way. The scandal that arose in Washington before our stories began was about the fact that the Obama administration is trying to criminalize investigative journalism by going through the emails and phone records of AP reporters, accusing a Fox News journalist of the theory that you just embraced, being a co-conspirator with felonies for working with sources. If you want to embrace that theory, it means that every investigative journalist in the United States who works with their sources, who receives classified information, is a criminal. And it's precisely those theories and precisely that climate that has become so menacing in the United States. It's why the New Yorker's Jane Mayer said investigative reporting has come to a standstill, her word, as a result of the theories that you just referenced.
Well, the question of who's a journalist may be up to a debate with regard to what you're doing. And, of course, anybody who's watching this understands I was asking a question. That question has been raised by lawmakers as well. I'm not embracing anything, but obviously I take your point.
I like when he says the question of who's a journalist might be up for debate. Oh, I agree. I agree. You're not a journalist. Glenn Greenwald, on the other hand, when he's holding people in power accountable, that's absolutely what journalism is and what it's supposed to be. Now, David Gregory released a new book, which nobody reads, and he went to do an interview with New York Magazine for the book, and apparently he's learned nothing. So let me read you a little exchange they had. New York Magazine asked, "The other segment that got a lot of attention was your interview with Glenn Greenwald. What do you think about that now?" He says, "I'm in the business as a journalist of asking tough questions. I would do it again, and so is he. And I found his response surprising and his fans' response surprising." In what way, they ask him. David Gregory responds, he has no problem taking people on and asking people questions and probing and pushing, and yet he seems to not like it when it's done to him. No. You see what he's trying to do here. He's trying to say, well, Glenn Greenwald asks people tough questions. I guess you could say he's a journalist. And switching from his previous position where he's like, I don't even know if he's a journalist. And he says, well, I also like to ask people tough questions. That's why I ask Glenn Greenwald tough questions. But he doesn't get it. He's not intelligent enough and intellectual enough to realize that he's being a hypocrite. No, Mr. David Gregory. The problem is not that you ask questions that are too tough. The problem is that you do not ask tough questions when it comes to the establishment and when it comes to lawmakers and when it comes to leaders, but when it's somebody who's actually questioning power, then all of a sudden you get tough, and you get tough in defense of the establishment. That's the problem. Notice how he said, I'm just asking a question that a lot of lawmakers are asking. Yeah, but wait, your job is to question the lawmakers and their bullshit. Not Glenn Greenwald, who's just simply trying to hold them accountable. And think of the facts of the story. The facts of the story were that the NSA was lying. They said, yeah, no, we're not spying on everybody in the country. We're not collecting metadata from everybody. And the Snowden leaks showed us that is 100% false. They're absolutely doing that. So they lied about it. Not only did they lie about it, but also that is unconstitutional. We have the Fourth Amendment in the United States, which said you have a protection from unreasonable search and seizure. Is it reasonable for all of your metadata to be collected with no warrant when you've never been involved in terrorism? Of course not. But David Gregory can't see that logic because he can't see straight because he's busy representing the establishment, representing the lawmakers that he references he's attacking Glenn Greenwald. David, the only person you asked tough questions to was Glenn Greenwald. All the politicians on your show you're chummy with and you're buddy-buddy with, which is part and parcel with why your ratings sucked balls. It's so sad to see a guy like David Gregory try to justify his nonsense. And clearly, not only does he not understand the Fourth Amendment, he also doesn't understand the First Amendment. What's one of the freedoms protected in the First Amendment? Freedom of the press. So he said to Glenn Greenwald, why shouldn't you be charged with a crime? Because of the fucking First Amendment and freedom of the press? The whole job of the press and the media is to hold the government accountable. They're going to lie to you. They're going to try to take more power. They're going to violate laws and the Constitution. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, being that that's the case, you need another form of checks and balances, not only within the government, with the different branches of government, but also with the media. The media is supposed to look at all of them and hold them all accountable by giving the American people the facts. He's basically saying, why shouldn't you be locked up for doing your job? And I love how Glenn Greenwald brought up Daniel Ellsberg there, because Daniel Ellsberg was the guy who released the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers showed how the United States, our government, our military, was doing out-and-out war crimes in Vietnam. Out-and-out war crimes. So we would do Agent Orange and napalm and chemical attacks and straight-up attacks on innocent villages, and we were killing untold numbers of civilians, and of course, the government did not want to release that information. Why? Because it makes them look like assholes, and it makes them look like immoral pricks. So they said, top secret, it embarrasses us, so you can't see what's happening in your name with your tax dollars. So we're not going to show you. And Daniel Ellsberg said, www.stepasidesson.com. And he released it. Now, at the time, many people said, oh, traitor. Oh, is he involved in espionage? Oh, is he with the communists? Oh, he doesn't believe in America. Oh, my God, he's a terrible person. He's immoral. All this shit. But guess what? The propaganda did not stick over time. Why? Because over time, hindsight's 20/20. We can look back in history and go, segregation seems kind of wrong. Slavery seems kind of wrong. Napalming innocent villages seems kind of wrong. We're going to punish the people who exposed that, not the people who did that, the people who exposed that. How ridiculous is that? Now we all realize Daniel Ellsberg is a hero. By the same token, some idiots today might say, oh, big bad Edward Snowden, he's a traitor even though there's no evidence of that. He's treasonous even though there's no evidence about it. He actually believes in the Constitution. People might come out swinging against Edward Snowden, but history will judge them wrongly. And history is going to completely forget somebody like David Gregory because he doesn't even understand what his job was, which is you're supposed to be a journalist, you're supposed to hold people accountable, and he didn't do that. He did the opposite.